Corinthians chapter 7, verse number 1. And kids, you're dismissed to head downstairs with Miss Laura and Ben for Fort Kids. Hope you all have a great time down there. While they're heading down, I want to give a shout out to Taylor and Trevor leading our young adult squad/ministry. They had their first outing this weekend, and the boys won at the escape room. So great job there. But love seeing that young adult ministry grow. My favorite thing on Monday nights is to look up here and see a bunch of cars because they're having a great time up here meeting, growing in the Lord, and together. Let's give it up for them. And man, appreciate y'all and your leadership in that. So today is one of these topics that I'll be honest with you, I haven't heard a lot of sermons on. You probably have not heard a lot of sermons on, and there's going to be some things that we say today and talk about that just to give you another warning, like we put on Facebook this week, this is going to be PG-13. It's going to have to be. We got to talk about some stuff that's in the Bible, that's in Scripture, that we need to deal with. And we also need to realize that there is the world's version of what we're talking about today, and then there is the Word's version, and they are butting heads consistently. What is the topic? The topic is sex. So this is your final warning, parents. We're going to dive in today and talk about some stuff. And I want to encourage you, parents, if you're like, I don't know about my kid hearing this. Listen, they've already heard it. They just heard the world's version, okay? I promise you. As somebody who taught sixth grade for a long time, man, there are kids way too young finding out stuff I didn't know until I was in high school. So, man, if they've already heard it. At least let them hear the Word and what the Word would say about this topic. So again, we're in this series called Loving Love, and it's all about how couples, you as a married couple, can love your love. And you're sitting here, and in fact, this morning in prayer, we were sitting here, we were praying, and Penny's like, but I'm not married. Like, but what do I listen to? Listen, I've got something for everybody today, okay? There's something in here for the single people. There's something in here for married people. There's something in here for couples who are engaged. There's something for everybody. So just listen and honor the other people who had to hear sermons already that have been directed towards them. Guys, I just want to say thank you for, man, gritting your teeth and bearing down last week. I've heard some great things from not just the guys, but also your wives. Y'all are doing some good stuff, guys. So great job to you all, ladies. Again, thank you for a couple weeks ago when we talked about wives and how just encouraging you were about working on things in your marriage and just like how much you appreciated it. Today, we're all going to learn something about this, but let me just kind of say, just acknowledge from the very get-go that sex is one of these things that, I heard this from somebody, it could either be your God, you could view it as a gift, or you could view it as being gross. Or basically your three options. Now, our world would love for it to be a god for you, that you would pursue after it. Pornography is one of the largest industries in the world because people have made it their god. It could also be on the other side of being gross. If you grew up in a Baptist church, you may have heard sex called the dirty, right? So like you hear something called the dirty and you're like, oh, I don't want to do the dirty. And maybe all you've heard in church for all the single people is don't do it. Just don't do it. In fact, I went through, if you remember this and you grew up in church, you remember this. Anybody remember the True Love Waits series? Anybody remember that? We had to go through that as youth. Anybody remember the book Kissing, Dating, Goodbye? You remember that? Okay, just three of us grew up in church, which is awesome. So, we remember those things. We went through those things, and they all gave one perspective about sex, but it's not always a biblical perspective on sex. And what one of my professors said is that if there is ever a mist or like a lack of clarification in the pulpit, then there's a fog in the pew. And here's what I know. Satan would love nothing more than to take one of God's greatest gifts to us that brings pleasure into a married couple and would love to build a whole lot of misconceptions around it and would love to put a fog around it that makes it eerie and kind of strange and something that we want to dive into. But let's just be honest, a lot of pastors, including myself, have found it to be an awkward topic to discuss. So this morning, here's my goal. What I want to do is I want to do really two things, actually three things. The first thing I want to do is I want to build what I'm going to call a theological framework around what does the Bible say about sex? What is sex, especially inside of a marital relationship? The next thing I want to do is I want to talk about there are 5 things that if you do these, it will hurt your relationship in having God-honoring, glorifying, and fulfilling sex inside of your marriage. The final thing I want to do is I want to flip the paradigm, and I want to say, hey, I don't just want to talk about what hurts, but I also want to talk about what helps inside of a marriage. So this morning, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, starting in verse 1. Now concerning the matters about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. Now just pause right there. Verse number 1 tells us Paul is taking a letter that somebody has sent to him, and he is responding back to it, okay? This is not what Paul is saying. Paul's not saying that it's just good for a man to never have sex. That's what the Corinthian believers are saying. So his response to this statement in verse 1 is, look in verse 2. But because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, but then come together again so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Verse number 6. Now as a concession, not a command, I say this. I wish that all were myself as I am, but each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one from another. I want to build a framework around sex based on 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 1 through 7. And to build this framework, the first thing I want to show you is this. Sex is a fire to burn inside the hearth of marriage. Sex is a fire to burn inside the hearth of marriage. Now, if I brought a lighter this morning, thank you for working. I have a couple of options, right? But if I want to make a bigger fire, what I could do with this flame is I could gather a whole bunch of other wood, and I could go and I could light it and set something else on fire. Another option, which, by the way, that option, if I go and I light other things, may be where sex becomes something about having multiple partners outside of just the one person. The other option that I really have with this is I could hold this and I could douse myself in gasoline and make a big fire. That would be more of the topic of like personal serving yourself, a word you've maybe never heard in church, masturbation, where you are serving yourself and you catch yourself on fire with sex. The other option, though, is the option that Scripture would teach, and that is to build something that can contain and bring you warmth and bring you safety and provide for you, which is inside of the hearth, the fireplace of marriage. And if you build your sexual life around that, listen, you won't get burned. You won't get hurt. You can let the flames burn as much as they want to. It's a place that God has for sex to be, yes, confined, but also to burn as well and bright and warmth as what you can possibly ever have it burn. So there's really people who look at this situation and they want to twist it in one of two directions. They'll say, well, just don't do it because it's bad. It's the dirty. It's something that's only going to harm you. And they'll twist it and make sex into something bad. In fact, maybe your grandparents were like mine. Previous generation was really like standoffish to sex, especially here in the South. And if you ever went to your grandparents' house, and they were like my grandparents and other grandparents that I know, and they slept in separate bedrooms, but they were still married, or they slept in the same bedroom but had two different beds, then here's what they viewed about sex, that it was something negative that you should only do for procreation. You should only do it to have kids. So there was one whole generation that taught a younger generation that sex is bad, but now there's the sexual revolution of the 1960s, and people, especially in my generation, are looking at sex now going, but it feels really good, and there's ways that we can control things about it to control the outcome of it, so why not just go ahead and do it? Which is really the second group of people. And the second group of people will look at sex as a blessing, but something that they can manipulate and work around. So when they come to sex, they're thinking about, how can I do this and get away with it? How can I do this and not have the STD that comes out of it or have a pregnancy that comes out of it? So they look at sex and like, well, how close can I get to having the pleasure, if they're a Christian, without actually having full-on sex? Or then they'll think, well, what if I can have sex, but instead of having the pregnancy, how can I prevent that through contraception and stuff like that? And then also, if I do get pregnant, what can I do now to stop it so I can keep having sex? And can I just say both perspectives are completely wrong? Instead of asking, how do we avoid it? And instead of asking, how can I still do this and get away with it? What we should be asking is, how can I view sex as a way to glorify God and be a blessing in my family? But listen, if you look at, according to verse number 2, according to verses 1 through 2, marriage is God's solution to lust and sexual temptations. That marriage is God's solution to lust and sexual temptations. Just look back at verse number 2. It says, because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife and each woman her own husband. That, man, people are going to lust. People are going to have sexual temptations. And if there is somebody who is burning with these sexual temptations and burning with lust, then here's what Paul would say is God's answer to that. Get married. Get married. Let it burn bright in your marriage. Instead of burning into sin, let it burn bright inside the hearth of your marriage. Man, have tons of sex with your spouse. Let that lust and the sexual temptations that you've had and you've been trying to hold on to and keep from acting on them while you were single, and let those things burn powerfully for your spouse. Lust after your spouse. Have temptations with your spouse. Chase after your spouse. And then let it consummate. Let it burn brightly inside the hearth of marriage. Every time, though, that God has a solution, listen, Satan has a misconception. God provides marriage. Satan provides a misconception. What is Satan's misconception that he provides when it comes to the topic of marriage? Satan provides an ideal and a philosophy that turns into something that we call shacking up or living together. Shacking up or living together. Because here's the misconception. When God says, let two people live together and be married, Satan says, live together and try it out. And here's the problem. When we live together and just try it out, it doesn't take faith, it doesn't take God, and guess what we get out of things that don't take God? Godless things. So it's a study done by not a Christian school, not a Christian company. It was a study from the University of Denver. And here's what they found. They found that you are 40% more likely to get a divorce if you lived with somebody than you are not living together. Listen, if you want a great way to guarantee that you'll get a divorce, live together. Live together. That's what the studies show. Because when you're living together, here's what it says. It says, I want the commitment without the responsibilities. I want the commitment without the issues that may come from having a fight and not being able to leave. It's saying, I want to drive the car, but never make a down payment. It's saying, I want to live in the house, but I don't want to pay rent. I want all the good stuff without having to actually sacrifice, without actually having to be dedicated as God would have me be dedicated. Why is it such a danger? That some people will say that living together isn't a test of what marriage will be like. It's a misconception about marriage that breeds a lack of commitment that spills over into marriage. That whenever I do premarital counseling with people, I always tell them, the way you date is the way you'll be married. That if you do things in dating, that's what you're going to get once you get married. Think about it like this. You ever driven by somebody building a house? When they're building the house, you know what they're doing? They're making sure everything inside is straight, that there's inspectors that come out. The inspectors look, make sure that your studs are on 16s on center. And they're making sure that everything's lined up. They're making sure the supports are right. They're making sure the rafters are right. They're making sure everything is framed up, because once you put the covering around it, once you put the siding on, once you put the flooring down, once you put the windows in, you put the roof on, it's going to be bearing more of a load. And if stuff isn't put up together in the framing stage, it's going to fall apart in the dressing up and finishing stage. But listen, living together is people trying to frame a house, but they're not doing it by the plans that God puts out. And they shouldn't expect that when the weight of the world falls onto their marriage, that the way that they framed it is going to withstand the power and the strength and the might of the world falling in on them. That couples, if you're here and you're dating, man, avoid living together. If you're living together and you're like, well, we're paying a lease and your parents are close, here's what I say to you. One person move out, keep paying on the lease, and then get married again. Get married when you have your date. You're like, but we've already got the ceremony. We want to keep living together, okay? Here's an option. I'll marry you privately, still have the public ceremony. You can keep doing what you're doing, but at least you're repentant about it and you're getting the framing right for your life, because sex that happens inside of a relationship should be in the heart of marriage. When you have one home and you're unified together and you're unified in the way that you're working forward towards Christ, man, God blesses that. Can I tell you, I've seen couples who have heard things like this and they're like, whoa, we got to get it right. And they get married. You know what happens? Man, God blesses their marriage in incredible ways. And a lot of times it's just like, oh, we didn't know. We didn't know. And listen, that's why I want to preach on these things, is because sometimes we just don't know, because pastors like myself, I'm at fault, don't preach these things, and we leave people ignorant and not knowing the truth about how to have a God-honoring sex life. The second thing is this: sex is supposed to be consensual with one another and in cooperation. Sex is supposed to be consensual with one another and in cooperation. That inside the marital relationship, both people are becoming one. You're becoming one flesh. You're coming together. And when they become one, sex should be consensual, since both people are saying, I want to serve the other person more than just serving myself. That sex should be about pleasing the other person, listen, more than it's just about pleasing themselves. It's consensual, that we want to do this with our spouse, which means that sex shouldn't be withheld. It shouldn't be used to manipulate, to say, well, I'll give you this when you do this for me. It also shouldn't be just because of frustration that we give this, or it shouldn't be withheld because of frustration. It also shouldn't be about an unwillingness between both partners to love each other and to serve one another. What it should be about is like how Christ lays his life down for the church, where men, we willingly give up ourselves to serve our spouse. And then out of that, our spouse looks back at us and goes, thank you for loving us, and they are consensual. On the same side, that it's where, ladies, you watch us as men love you and care for you, and that you respond in caring and loving us, not just in physical ways, and that we as men look back at our spouse and say, I would love to have sex because here's how you're caring for me. In fact, if you look at verses 3-4, it's clear that sex is consensual in the fact that a wife gives to her husband in a way to meet his sexual desires, and the husband gives to her to meet her sexual desires. And there's been a couple of big studies in the last couple of years that have tried to disprove what the Bible proclaims. Here's what they're trying to disprove. A lot of studies are trying to say that couples who are promiscuous outside of their marriage actually have a higher sexual satisfaction than couples who are monogamous, meaning they only have sex with their spouse for the rest of their life. And some of the studies actually do say that sexual satisfaction with multiple partners is higher in those instances than just sex inside of things. Now, listen, if your goal is to be sexually satisfied and have all the sex you can ever have, okay, it's going to be far easier to have multiple partners than it is to have one partner that you've got to engage with and talk to and not be rude to actually have sex. It'll be easier. But here's the problem. You may have a little bit lower sexual satisfaction in being married to only one person, but your pleasure in knowing that you are loved and that you are valued by someone is much exceedingly higher than it would be having multiple sexual partners. The fallout and the breakdown in the family is much lower, and divorce rates are much lower in families who only are monogamous one another and only have their spouse as a sexual partner. So just looking at studies, the studies aren't looking at the powerful picture that the Bible paints of what sex does, and that sex not only gratifies and pleases us, but also draws people together into being fully committed and happier and more satisfied and fulfilled people in the world. So divorce rates are lower, abuse rates are lower, emotional trauma rates are lower, and here's what I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt. Research is trying to disprove what the Bible has been proclaiming for years, and eventually it'll catch up and say, oh, we blew it, y'all. The Bible was actually right. Just stick with what the Bible says, and you will find that it is always 100% true. In fact, just look down at verse number 5. Verse number 5 says, do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, but then come together again so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. That sex is not just consensual, but sex is also in cooperation with how God is moving in your life. Now, for married and unmarried folks alike, when you look at verse number 5, here's what you realize. That for a married couple to pause and to focus on their spiritual development puts them essentially in the same place as an unmarried person, whether young or older, and says, prioritize following the Lord, prioritize cooperating on what God needs to work in your life. So for the married couple, for you to pause having sex and to focus on your spiritual walk is almost like a fast. A fast where you may stop eating food to say, I'm going to prioritize the things of God. We're going to focus on the Lord. That you as a married couple may feel like either individually or you as a couple are feeling like you're drifting away from the Lord, but you're close together, right? You're having lots of sex. It's like very fulfilling inside of your marriage. And here's what you may say. You may look at your spouse and say, hey, honey, we need to stop for a little bit because I really feel like we're drifting away from the Lord. And yes, there's a lot of pleasure between us, but we've got to get back to the things of the Lord. And here's what your spouse is going to do. Whatever we got to do, let's fix this, right? They're going to be motivated because they're like, I want to get back to the pleasure of things. So you as a couple are going to be digging into the things of God. You're going to be working things back into your life. Listen, trusting and following the Lord like an unmarried person. Because you're fully giving everything back to the Lord. So for the unmarried person, listen, what the pastor says is a gift to the married people that they get to have sex is also a gift to you to not have sex. Because here's the ultimate gift, that you and I get to know Jesus. That's the ultimate gift. So wherever you may be in your relationships, wherever you may be in your life, if you're married or if you're unmarried, wherever you may be, the ultimate gift is for you to know Jesus and to cooperate with what he's doing in your life. So for the unmarried person, the way that you cooperate is just to not have sex, to not view pornography, to not get caught up into lust, to not get caught up into masturbation, to not get caught up in pleasing yourself, but instead to get caught up in trusting in God. And here's what's incredible about this, is that for you who are unmarried, and maybe you're dating somebody, you're like, but I'm ready to have sex now. We're ready to have sex now. We're ready to have sex now. Listen, by you pausing for a second or not having sex, you get to develop in your life several of the fruits of the Spirit. In fact, listen to this. Galatians 5:22-23. The fruit of the Spirit is love. Listen, not just love for people, love for God, to develop your love for God. You're not just focusing on pleasing someone else. You're focusing on loving God. Joy. You're developing in your life joy outside of some of the pleasures that you may be able to find in life. That when temptations come into your life and they're trying to rip your heart apart and to say that, hey, you deserve this. Hey, you've got to find this in sex. That you get to develop peace in your life by saying, no, I'm going to trust in God's plan for me. I'm going to push away the things of the world. And then you're going to develop the next one, everybody's favorite fruit of the Spirit, patience. Don't you love when God makes you wait to develop patience? That you're developing patience and going, how long, oh Lord, until you send me that cutie pie? Lord, I've swiped left, I've swiped right, I've done everything. Lord, how long? Maybe you're dating a guy and you're like, we've been dating 5 years. How long, oh Lord, until he's going to propose to me? You've just been waiting and waiting and waiting. Listen, you're getting to develop patience in your life. And patience is this: trusting God and making the most of whatever season you're in. That's patience. You're waiting. Your spouse may be off somewhere working, you're not able to see one another, and you're developing patience over weeks and months and days of not getting to see them and to spend time with them. And then you do, and then you get to develop kindness and being kind to people. You develop goodness and caring for people. You develop faithfulness and being faithful to the things of the Lord, gentleness, and finally you develop self-control. When that profile comes across, and it's somebody in a scantily clad outfit, and you're really tempted to press on the picture and look, and you deny it, you're developing self-control. When you're out with your significant other, and you're sitting in the car and that song comes on, little Marvin Gaye slips into the radio, and it's dark around you, and Cupid flies up with a candle that's lit, and it starts snowing in July. And you're ready for bow chicka wow wow. You develop self-control and going, I'm going to crank the car and put this bad boy in drive or first gear, and we're going to get out of here. Because you're developing in your life the things of God, and you're like, but I really want to have sex right now. Listen, don't miss in this season what God wants to develop in you because you want to rush into the next season. Don't miss in this season what God wants to develop in you because you want to rush into the next season. Ladies, can I talk to you for just a second? I'm saying this as a dude who knows dudes. Okay? But ladies, there are Christian guys who want to date you and they want to manipulate you with verses like 3 and 4 in this passage that say, your body pleases me, and that you should give to me what I want. Now, ladies, it's the same trick Satan plays in that he tries to get you to twist the words of God and actually pay attention to what it says. Because what it says is a husband has rights over his wife, and the wife has rights over her husband, not boyfriend, girlfriend, first of all. Here's the other thing. Ladies, they will try to talk you into doing sexual things with them. And they'll say things like, honey, I love you so much. Nobody is going to love you like I love you. Nobody's going to care for you. We're going to be together forever. I promise you. So because we're going to be together forever, we're going to get married one day. And because we're going to get married one day, we're just thinking about the future. We're living in faith, baby. And let's fool around. Let's touch. Let's have sex. Let's just go all the way. I know that, man, that's what the preacher says. I know that's what the Bible says. But listen, honey, we're going to be together. Let's just go ahead and do this. Listen, ladies. If the guy leads you into sin now, he likely won't lead you into holiness as your husband. Ladies, if the guy leads you into sin now, he likely won't lead you into holiness as your husband. Here's what I would tell you. Confront him about it. Say, honey, sweetie, cutie pie, we can't keep doing this. We're not going to live in sin. We're not going to keep doing the things that you want us to do. And I can't do this as your girlfriend. More importantly, you can't do this as a follower of Jesus, a daughter of the King. Listen, girls, if he disagrees and if he says, no, we've got to keep going on, break up with him. He's not worth your time. And I'll even give you this. If you look at him and he says no, just look at him and go, well, Pastor Ryan says I got to break up with you, so I'm done. Put it back on me, all right? I'll take it. I'll take the brunt of the 14-year-old little boy that's going to cry later, okay? I'll take the brunt of it, all right? But let me be so bold this morning to confront a lie that several young people believe. I'm about to say some words in church you've never heard in church before, okay? Let's just all be adults about it, and this is the PG-13 part. Here's the lie that a lot of young people believe. If it's not a penis going inside of a vagina, it's not actual sex. So teenagers are convinced of things like this. If we do hand jobs and blow jobs and anal sex, then it's okay. that's not okay. And some guys will talk girls into doing all of these things because they think just because it's not vaginal that it's okay. Just because it's not vaginal doesn't mean that it's not venomous to your spirit and your walk with God. That sin is sin. In fact, if there was ever anybody who raised the standard on what sex actually is, it was Jesus. Jesus said in Matthew 5:27, "You have heard that it said, 'You shall not commit adultery.'" This is the boy going, "We're not having vaginal sex, so let's do everything else." And here's what Jesus would say in verse 28. If you'll click to verse 28, for some reason I can't hit verse 28. He says, "I say to you, everyone who looks at a woman or a man with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Boom, lock, stock, and barrel. There's the argument. So ladies, the next time that he does that, you may be consensual, and your premarital sex might be consensual, but it's not in cooperation with God's plan for your life. Therefore, it is sin. Ladies, don't let him talk into compromising your beliefs. Don't let him talk you into doing things that are honestly only for your husband. Guys, you may have an aggressive girlfriend. Listen, don't give to the person you're dating what you should give to your future spouse. Don't give to the person you're dating what you should give to your special spouse, to your future spouse. And I know the arguments. Well, we've got a ring on it. We're getting married. Listen, I've seen plenty of people break up on the altar. I've seen several people walk away from each other the week before they get married. That girls, he may give you a promise ring. You know what promise rings are? They're expensive ways of saying, I care for this person. There's no commitment in it. There's no commitment. They may give you their Letterman jacket. And in giving you their Letterman jacket, you're like, oh, it's so good. It smells like him. Listen, I had plenty of girls give me back my Letterman jacket. It's just a coat. That right now, we've got a lot of younger people that think that sex doesn't do anything. It's just hooking up. It's just fun. Listen, what sex does, young people, is it wires your brain to the other person. So here's what happens. You'll see a young couple, and they'll fight, they'll have knockdown, drag-out fights, and you know people that are probably people are coming to your mind as I'm talking. And they'll fight, and they'll fight, and they'll fight, and everybody's like, they are terrible for each other. But they can't break up. You know why they can't break up? Because they're having sex, and their brains are wiring them to the other person. And if they hadn't have been doing that, you know what they could do? They could just walk away. That every time you have sex with somebody, you wire your brain to somebody else. And listen, if you want to give your full brain to somebody, it's hard to when you've got a body count all back here that you're having to hold on to. That save yourself for the person that you're going to be with the rest of your life. Don't give to the person you're dating what you should give to your future spouse. The third and the final thing to build a framework about sex is that sex is a gift and an act of worship inside of marriage. Sex is a gift and an act of worship inside of marriage. What we know about Paul is that Paul was unmarried. And we really see that he wraps up his argument in verses 6 through 7. In fact, Paul wished everybody could be as he was, as he says in verse 6, that he wishes everybody could be single. Listen, not single and ready to mingle, but single and fully focused on the Lord. He wishes everybody was able to control their sexual urges so that they didn't have to be married, so that they could give themselves fully to the things of God instead of having to work on the relationship with God and their relationship with a spouse. But look at what he says in verse 7. He says, but to each his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another. That whether you are single or you are married, controlling your urges or expressing them with your spouse in marriage, your life is a gift from God. Whether you are fully focused on God and you're controlling your urges and you're unmarried, or whether you are married and sex is that fire burning inside the hearth of marriage, wherever you are, Paul would say and God would say, you are blessed. That your life is a gift from God. And can I tell you, we've got to learn as people not to think negative about single people. Because a lot of times people who are single in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, people are like, what's wrong with them? Nothing. Maybe they just have higher standards than the rest of us. Y'all, if I can trick Shasta to marry me, anybody can do something, right? Like, I don't know. That just because somebody's single doesn't mean there's something wrong with them. Maybe they're choosing that because here's what they've realized. There's things in their life that they want to fully focus on God. There's freedoms that they want to have that they can't have inside of marriage. And maybe they can control their urges better than we can. If anything, them being single might prove that they're more in self-control than we are. Let's not look down on them for that. The single person in trusting in God and living for God is just as godly and amazing as a couple who is married and having sex every single day, multiple times a day. Because they're doing for the Lord, unto the Lord, what the Lord asks of them. In fact, Paul would say it this way later to the Corinthians: whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all to the glory of God. So you're sitting there going, I got to have sex to the glory of God? Like, do I have to play worship music while we have sex? Like, do I turn on the Gaither song, He Touched Me, when we have sex? Like, listen, it's not that. It's not having to think about church and to read the Bible while you're having sex. That would be weird, okay? That you have sex to God's glory when you have sex in the way God has defined, consensually with your spouse. Consensually with your spouse. When sex is outside of marriage, that worship that you have in saying, thank you for sex, God, is given to us and a person instead of to God. That sex outside of a committed marriage is getting what we want outside of the way that God said to get it. And by the way, that is always the basis for every form of idolatry. Let me get what I want aside from the way that God defines it and says to do it. If you read through the Bible, here's what you'll find. Every time somebody goes outside the ways of God and they get what they want, aside from doing it the way that God wants, there's always disaster that falls. Always. Now, I know that there's cases out there that may be different than this, but listen, the rate of people who get a sexually transmitted disease, who their only partner is their spouse, way, way down here at the bottom. The rate of people who get sexually transmitted disease by having a lot of sex with people who aren't their spouse, way up here. You know, there's only been one person in the billions upon billions of people who have ever lived on this world who got pregnant without having sex. Listen, if you want to avoid getting pregnant, probably a good chance you're not going to if you don't get sex, if you don't have sex. That's a great way not to get pregnant. The way that God defines things to work, it just works that way, y'all. And listen, when a married couple consents to enjoy one another and views sex as a gift from God, they're committing an act of worship, because worship at its heart is enjoying God's blessings and saying, thank you, God. Can we just think about something for a second? God could have made making babies the most unpleasurable thing that he could have ever made. But instead, he made sex something pleasurable. Maybe because he wants us to enjoy it. Maybe he wants us to enjoy our spouse. Maybe he wants us to have fun practicing and not just having kids. That sex is a gift from God, and that when we enjoy it, and that when we serve our spouse through it, listen, it's an act of worship as much as you putting money in the offering plate, you raising your hands at worship, you bringing your Bible to church, you serving God by giving him of yourself throughout the day. Whatever it is, it's an act of worship. But listen, if it's not done God's way, it's an act of worship given to someone else. And that's idolatry. So what do we do with all this? If you are here this morning and you want to have God-honoring sex inside of your marriage, here's how you make sure that you don't hurt that. I'm going to give you 5 ways really quickly of how to hurt God-honoring sex And then I'm going to give you 5 ways to bless and to help you have God-honoring sex. The first one is this: porn. If you want to hurt having God-honoring sex, watch a lot of porn. Porn is fake sex from people who are professionals. These professionals often use enhanced drugs, acting, camera editing, video editing, camera angles, and other ways to edit it and make it look like they are being more pleasured than what they actually are. So here's what happens. You watch porn, by the way, that you get to search for and you get to find, meaning you get to define the person you're watching, which means when you come back to your spouse who's full of imperfections that you can't change, you're like, well, they can't give me what I can get in a video online. Exactly. You're hurting your God-honoring sex with you and your partner. Also, when you get to watch porn, because it is on demand, you should feel like you should access it and get to have it anytime that you want, which means you don't have to be patient with your spouse. You don't have to be patient and giving and serving of them. And it's also outside of God's plan for your sex life, because every time you watch sex and you masturbate, you lust. And Jesus says, if you lust, you've already committed adultery. Porn is not just something you get to do at home in the privacy of your bathroom or your bedroom. It's something that destroys God-honoring sex. So how do you quit? Quit in these 3 ways. Remind yourself it's fake. Also remind yourself that the people you're watching are somebody's daughter or son. They were somebody's daughter or son at one point in time. The second thing is up at Covenant College, a gentleman created something called Covenant Eyes, and it's for accountability. It's an app that goes on your phone or on a computer, and it'll basically watch all the things that you're watching, and it will send an alert to somebody for accountability and say, hey, this person saw something that wasn't good. They'll help keep you accountable. It'll help you quit watching porn. The third thing is this: to preach the gospel to yourself every time you are tempted. That there's something about hearing about the sacrifice of Jesus that makes somebody's exposed skin on a screen not look so appealing. Because when you think about how Jesus was exposed himself and that he was naked and that his back and sides were ripped for us and he was hung on a cross nude, suddenly looking at porn just isn't something that we want to do. The second thing is, the second way to hurt God-honoring sex is this: pausing with no plan to start back. Pausing with no plan to start back. Couples will sometimes pause for a season because you're tired, because you're frustrated with one another, medical reasons, spiritual reasons, and other reasons. And the pausing is not the problem. The problem is never having a plan to start back. Because 1 week can turn into 2, and 2 weeks can turn into 4 months, and 4 months can turn into years, and only on birthdays and only on special holidays. Porn sneaks in. Extramarital partners sneak in, resentment sneaks in, and the bedroom turns into a place only for sleeping and not sex. Listen, if that's your marriage, let me give you a little help that's been a blessing to us. Schedule it. Schedule it. You're like, that's not very sexy. It's not, but it makes it work. All right? Schedule it. Listen, you're going to be tired. You're going to come home and you're going to look at your partner and it's going to be, I don't know, I have all these puns running through my mind right now for every single day. Let's just say it's Wednesday hump day, all right? And you're like, sorry. It's like, I said masturbation earlier. That's not the worst thing you've heard me say today, okay? So it's Wednesday, and you're like, all right, honey, we're tired, we're exhausted, it's been a long week, let's get this over with. You know what's going to happen? You're going to do it one time, and then the next week it might not be so bad, but you've got it on the calendar, and now you're looking forward to it, and you've been thinking about it all day, and you're sending each other sweet texts, and here's what happens. When it was awkward, and when it was almost resentful, you begin to build back the passion because you're stoking the flames by making a plan to make it happen. So, if you want to hurt God-honoring sex, pause it and never have a plan to start back. The third thing is poor communication. Guys, this one is mostly on us. If we can't talk with our wife, we shouldn't expect our wife to give any loving to us. And if we can't respond to her text, if we can't take a drive with her in the car, if we can't put our phones up, if we can't stop playing the video games, if we just can't communicate, if we make decisions without her, we shouldn't expect her to give herself to us in the most vulnerable way she could possibly give herself to us. We've got to be able to communicate. That women, as we said a couple weeks ago, often start with an emotional connection and move to the physical. And guys, we move from physical to emotional, and we have to break the mold and serve our wife and connect with her emotionally through communication. We have to ask how she's doing. We have to send her sweet notes. We have to tell her that we love her. We have to listen to her, not just go, yep, okay. You ready? That we've got to listen to our spouse, to discuss the things that you don't like with your spouse, to hear her talk about her day, to hear her share her frustrations with you about things that are going on in her life. Just talk like you did when you were first trying to date her. Just talk with her. Listen to her. Try to win her heart again like you did when you were dating. The fourth thing that we can do to really make sure that we hurt our God-honoring sex is to have a packed bed. A packed bed. I'm not talking about throw pillows. I'm talking about kids and animals. Now, ladies, the last one was more for the guys. This one's more for you. Okay? I'm an equal opportunist at this church, all right? Listen, we have 2 kids. We have had to co-sleep for seasons, okay? I get it. That sometimes it's easier just to roll over and feed the kid than it is to have to get up and walk in and get the kid while they're screaming and crying. Sometimes your toddler will walk into the room while you're asleep and you wake up and there's 2 little beady eyes staring at you and your soul leaves your body for a second. And you're just like, I don't want to get up. I'm warm. Just get in bed. Listen, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the 17-year-old who's still sleeping in your bed. Okay? That's a little much. I'm talking about the 3-year-old, the 4-year-old. I'm talking about when you go to bed at your house, it is an expectation that you're going to have a child with you in your bed. That you have an expectation that your animal is going to sleep in your bed, at the foot of your bed, whatever it may be. Listen, here's what we have to make sure of. We have to make sure that we don't have packed beds with kids because it's bad developmentally for a child to sleep with mommy and daddy all the time. An unfulfilled sex life always means a packed bed of some sort. A phone, games, kids, a dog, whatever it may be. So here's what I tell you. Kick the kids out of bed, put them back in their own bedroom, let them cry, let them figure it out, because your spouse is more important than your child. Your spouse is more important than your child. That you're becoming one flesh with your child just because a child came out of your flesh does not separate you and your spouse. You are still one flesh. If it's an animal, kick out Fido so you can get frisky. All right? I told Donnie at lunch this week, I was like, I'm going to have a hard time not saying that. He was like, I think you should. So blame that one on Donnie. All right? Here's the fifth thing, that if you want to make sure that you hurt having God-honoring sex, put your personal rights ahead of the other person's. Put your personal rights ahead of the other person. After all I've done and said today, now that everybody's mad at me, let me kind of help all of us today, okay? Sometimes guys will come into the bedroom and they'll work a long shift that day and they'll serve and they'll look at their spouse and they'll say something like this: after all I've done, isn't the least you could do for me? Ladies, doesn't that get your gears just going? Woo, man, what a turn on, right? Or ladies, you're desiring something, and after you've told him how crazy and stubborn and frustrating it is to be married to him, don't you think he just, man, gets riled up the more that you talk down to him? It doesn't work. And in the same way, whenever you start having sex and you start doing things, sometimes we'll put our personal side ahead of our spouse, and we'll make pleasing and we'll make the sex about us instead of realizing sex is not just about us, but as verse 3 tells us, that the wife should give to her husband his conjugal rights, and likewise, the husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights. Let me give you a great tip. Here's a great tip. If you take care of your spouse will take care of you. If you put your spouse first, they will make sure that you are taken care of. Don't put your personal rights ahead. Let me finish. Last 5 things that'll be helpful, okay? Here's something helpful. Foster trust. Foster trust. Last week we talked about that the relationship should have trust, and that, guys, there's nothing that can build trust for your wife towards you like you laying your life down for your wife. So here's what I would tell all of us. Make sure that your spouse has all of your passwords. All of them. You should never have a secret social media account that your spouse doesn't know about. Even if you are on like Xbox Live, like chat or whatever, like let them know that. Let them know. Share all of your passwords. That if you have a bank account, share a bank account, deal with finances together. Do what you say you're going to do, because oftentimes doubts become barriers. And that when we can remove doubts, we can remove barriers, and we foster trust, then 2 people who are the most vulnerable when we're nude and when we're having sex are going to be far more trusting and willing to be vulnerable than we ever will be. The next one, flirt. You got to learn to flirt. Do you remember when you were dating and you'd flirt? Some of you are like, that's a long time ago. Remember flirting though? Kind of walk by and be like, boom, kind of bump them a little bit, kind of poke them, may tickle them a little bit. You may say something like, hey, cutie, it's good to see you today. Oh, yeah, a little spicy up there, wasn't it? You may send them a text and say, hey, thinking about you. That there's little things that we can do to flirt, to send a little sassy text, give them a little nudge when you walk by, give them a side smile, compliment how they look, smack them on the butt, do something, right? Just to kind of flirt, to put a little bit of energy there between you that's playful and fun. Compliment how they look. Now, listen, this is only for the married couples that I'm going to say this, okay? Only for the married couples. Guys, no matter the age gap, commenting on and liking pictures of younger ladies is weird. It's weird. There are people who are older and will comment on younger pictures of or ladies who are younger, and they'll say things like, oh, you look great. You're so beautiful. You're sweet. Guys, that's weird. That's a compliment you should only give to your spouse. That you should only be complimentary towards your spouse. Telling somebody they're pretty is just weird. And here's what it makes me think. What else are you looking at? Like, you're a grown man. Stop telling younger girls they're cute. You shouldn't be looking at that. That's just weird. Only flirt with your spouse. The third thing is this, to fantasize about your spouse. Fantasize about your spouse. You know, lust when you are single is dangerous and it's a sin, but when lust is towards your spouse, it burns the fires of love and sex inside the hearth of marriage. It's helpful. Think about your spouse, not only what you love about them and appreciate them, but think about what they do that turns you on and tell them that. Fantasize about them. Listen, I'm going to be very careful in how I say this. I'm just going to say it because I'm on the point. Don't fantasize about your spouse dressed up like someone else. That's a little bit of pornography there. Fantasize about your spouse as God made them. Appreciate them in that way. Trust in them that way. Build them up that way, and watch your sex life blossom. The fourth one that's helpful is a little bit of foreplay. Have foreplay. That'll help your sex to be God honoring. You can check off a word you never thought you'd hear in church just now. The word foreplay. Listen, foreplay is not just what you do once you start kissing and undressing. Foreplay is what you do before that. It's the cuddling, it's the holding hands, it's the giving nice little kisses on the cheek throughout the day. It's the little bit of lingering kisses when you are leaving for work in the morning. It's the lingering kiss that happens when you see them at the end of the day. It's you sending them a text and saying, hey, I love you and I care for you and I'm thinking about you. It's sending flowers. It's allowing them to go and have time with their friends. It's all the things that build up to, listen, minimize stress. That's what foreplay is. Foreplay is minimizing stress and building deeper connections with your spouse. And here's what happens. It primes the pump of love every time to have a little bit of that foreplay. The final thing is this: fight together. Fight together. Sadly, some couples have been fighting together so long that they're fighting against each other and not for each other. And what breaks my heart is they don't even know why they're fighting, because it's been going on so long. Fight together. Fight for time together. Fight for the person's attention. Fight for their love. Fight for them in prayer. Fight for them to make sure that they're sitting beside you every single day. Fight to make sure they're laying their head down on the pillow at night beside you. Fight to make sure that you know every deepest and darkest secret of their soul. Fight for space in your calendar with them. Fight for every moment you can to make sure that your spouse is the most important thing in your life. I would say fight for, and you can write this down, it's called the 7-7-7 rule. The 7-7-7 rule. Every 7 days, one date. Now, you're sitting there going, we can't do that either financially, or we can't do that because we have kids. Listen, a date could be you just sitting on the sofa, curled up, watching a TV show. It could just be catching up on coffee. It could be taking a walk together. That sometimes we have to redefine date by the season of life that we're on, but spend time together. That's what a date is spending time together. So one date night every 7 days. The next one would be every 7 weeks, have a weekend getaway together or an overnight stay somewhere. It could be that you are like, hey, we're just going to go down to the Hilton and we're just going to get a hotel. It could be, hey, we're going to send the kids to the in-laws or the parents or sisters or brothers or wherever they may need to go, and that you're going to spend at least one night together in a hotel room, going out on a date, making something special inside of your marriage. And then every 7 months, this is the third 7, you go on some sort of a vacation that's longer, that's just the two of you. Just the two of you. That you get away. You get away for more than one night somewhere, and you shut your phones off and you just spend time together, just developing your relationship together. It could be a staycation, it could be an overnight somewhere. It could be that you're like, hey, we just want to stay home, and you kick the kids out of the house and send them somewhere else for a couple of days. Fight for each other, because here's the truth. Someone is always fighting for your spouse. Make sure that person is you. Can I tell you, there's somebody at work that thinks your spouse is cute. There's somebody at the golf course that thinks your spouse is cute. There's somebody online that thinks your spouse is cute. There's somebody somewhere that likes your spouse and that is building a relationship with your spouse that you don't have. So listen, if there's anybody that's going to fight for your spouse, it better be you. It better be you. Make sure that person is you. So the question comes, well, what do we do with all this, right? That's a lot of stuff. Let me give you something really, really simple. If you're here and you're married, here's what I would ask that you would do this afternoon. That you would pray and talk about the things that you heard today. Just as a couple, you'd pray about it and you'd talk about it. And then finally, if you have not been having sex, it's been very organic. If it's been a while, if it takes a lot to get there, here's what I'd encourage you to do. Schedule it. Schedule it. Put it on the calendar. Find a day. And man, say, this is the date, this is the time, this is when it's going to happen, no matter what, no matter if we're frustrated with one another, no matter if we're exhausted, whatever it takes, we're going to have sex on this date, and then do it. Another way to say it, just do it, okay? Make sure that it happens. If you're here today and you're like, well, I'm unmarried, what do I do with all this? Here's what I would say to you. Preserve it. Preserve yourself. You may not know today, God may send you somebody tomorrow, or God may not send you anybody at all. It may just be you trusting and serving the Lord. Preserve yourself as God has made you in the image of God and cares for you deeply. He wants you to preserve your purity. Your body is a temple unto God. The next thing is, when it comes to sex, avoid it. Avoid it. There's going to be places, there's going to be music, there's going to be people who will tempt you to fall into sex, or will tempt you to watch pornography, whatever it may be. Avoid those places. And finally, if you are having sex and you're unmarried, here's my greatest pastoral advice ever. Stop. Just quit. Just quit. That's it. Just quit. Wait until you're married. You're like, but we've already been having sex. Okay, quit. God will honor you quitting. Because at least you're repentant about it and you're realizing, hey, we've got to stop, and we're going to start back once we're married. But quit, okay? Just quit. All these things are ultimately way impossible for us. They are, because it's a temptation that we fight, and there's no way that we could ever be the husbands or the wives that we want to be, or that we could ever be the single people that we truly want to be without having a relationship with Jesus.